We're going to continue our Only Matthew series. These are like the passages, the parts of Matthew that aren't found in any other gospel. They're not found in Mark, they're not found in Luke, they're not found in John. And so we're just kind of continuing, in a linear fashion through Matthew with only the Matthew texts. And so we're continuing that. Just before we jump in and we look at the manuscripts that are on your seats, we need to remember that the Beatitudes came before this. This is the middle of the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says all that blessed stuff. Blessed are the poor in spirit. And then he also, just to make a connection with this passage, he says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. And we have to understand the context of this sermon is Jesus is establishing his kingdom people. He's basically saying, what does it really look for, when my people are actually acting or are doing what they're called to do, what does that really look like? My kingdom people. So he's establishing what makes his people different, what makes his people the kingdom of God, what the kingdom of heaven. He's using that language in this text, in this context for this text. So go ahead. You guys know the drill. You got your pieces of paper, read through it. I'll give you a few minutes to do that, and then you will turn to your neighbor or people around you and just discuss it. What do you notice? What's jumping off at you? What's kind of impacting you in the passage? So go ahead and read it now. All right, as you guys finish up reading the passage, go ahead, turn to your neighbor, people around you. What are you seeing? What's going on? What do you notice from the passage? All right, I want to give you guys about 10 more seconds. All right, so let's go ahead and have a collective conversation. What are your questions, comments, kind of insights from this passage? Let's go ahead and have a collective conversation. Noah will be running around the mic, so if you want to say something, go ahead and raise your hand. Shout it out. So who has a question, comment, insight? He's not really running, so just go ahead and say it out loud.
In 23 it says, if your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. And the only thing that came to mind is, what if you don't know if your brother or sister has something against you? Also, like, that makes me feel like if you have something against someone else, then it's your place to say something to them so that they can reconcile. Also, I was wondering what Raka meant.
You're only limited to one insight at a time. She had 14. No, I think that's interesting, that what if you don't know that someone has something against you? I think you should get a crystal ball. Maybe one of those little 8-ball things where you shake it. Does somebody have some problem with me? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. I think we can't go and deal with it if we don't know it exists. I mean, I hope we live in a way that we're humble enough that people could approach us. I think maybe that's part of the challenge that we have, is to live in a way that people could be like, hey man, that hurt, or I'm troubled by this, or something like that, you know. So, and then Matthew later deals with, you know, how you should if they have offended you. Okay. Any other comments, questions?
So in verse 22, when he says the thing about if you say to your brother or sister Raka, it's answerable to the court, does he literally mean the courts, or is that some kind of like meaning of like God's judgment, or what?
It's like the Sanhedrin, you know, that was like the Jewish kind of council or elders. It's like you're answerable to the court. And Raka just means like crap for brains, or like empty-headed one, or you fool kind of a thing. So yeah, basically if you talk trash to somebody, you should get reported to the elders. Like you're answerable, you're accountable for your words. So, any other comments, questions, insights?
When it says on your way, when you're to reconcile with your brother, and it's on your way to the judge, or on your way to the court, does it mean like on your path through Christianity?
Maybe that's a good way to take it as a metaphor. I'm thinking they've snatched you up and they're saying, I'm taking you to the judge. Like, I've got you by your ear, and we're going to like have it out in front of the elders, and I'm going to take you to court now. And on your way, as you walk to the proceedings, you would, you know, not be defensive. The only reason why you hang out with this dude and you're like, yeah, let's go to court, is because you think you're right. You want to win. And he's like, yeah, what if you don't win? Then you have to pay everything. Now you're in trouble. You wait till the last moment. You wait till it's too late to reconcile with the person. So as you go, be humble, you know. Don't be defensive, and work it out with them on the way to the court proceeding. And this is actually not your brother. This is your adversary in this part of the text. Earlier it's your brother. This later is someone who's just like coming after you. So I think that's it. I think we're going to jump in. Sorry, I know there's a lot in this text that is applicable to life. I think it's interesting, part of something I observed is the internal anger leads to external outburst, you know, and that you're responsible for reconciliation, that someone else is offended with you, but you're still responsible to go to them, you're responsible to reconcile, and you only go to courts if you think that you're right, basically. So I had an intense conflict a few weeks ago. I've been working on this new house. I bought this house. It's very underground. It was basically a burned out shell. There was no wires, no plumbing, no walls. Anybody worked on my house? You remember my house? It's like there was nothing there. It was just like this blackened kind of shell of a home. And so I've been working really hard to kind of rebuild this house. And so it's just broken my body, both my knees, my elbows, my shoulder. I'm just like fatigued. This is a few weeks ago. I'm just fatigued. I'm tired. It's cost me a ton of money, and I'm in that state of mind where I'm just kind of like that smoldering anger at all times. Okay, do you guys know what I'm talking about? Where you're just like, cross me, I dare you. You fantasize about a moped just crossing your path. You're like, do it. Do it. That's my mental state in this one particular day, and I go to walk outside of my door, my front door. Front lawn is this chihuahua, which is offensive enough that it exists as an animal. But this chihuahua in particular is one of those hood chihuahuas. I live in Ybor City, kind of in the neighborhood, and this is a hood chihuahua. This chihuahua walks everywhere. This chihuahua owns the neighborhood. He literally thinks, I own this all. This belongs to me. He is the godfather of the neighborhood. And he marks everything. He walks right, he's like a constant stream of urine. He's just like, psst, mine, psst, mine. People walk by, he's like, psst, mine, you know? He is a terror. This dog, I don't know where he lives. He's just walking around. But he's on my front lawn. Now, the thing is, I also think I belong in the neighborhood. I think, like, God has given it to me. God has called me to this neighborhood, to this place, to be Jesus, to be like Jesus in this place, to bring beauty and life and to be in relationship with people. This is what I belong there too. So I walk out on my front porch, and this stupid dog starts growling and barking at me. We're in conflict now. Who really belongs? And I'm like, instant attack mode. I'm like, I'm gonna come kick this dog. You know, I don't endorse abusing animals, but in this moment, I'm like, I'm gonna punt this puppy so far. I just want to kill him. I'm gonna snap him. But I'm like, oh, he's gonna bite me. There's gonna be rabies involved, and that's gonna be like a sad moment. So I was like, okay, I hate this dog. We're in conflict. There's a tension here. Who belongs in the neighborhood? He thinks that he owns my property. I think I should punt him. So I turn back. I don't just go back inside. I don't just close my door and ignore him. I go back inside and I call Cheddar, my 55-pound black lab. It's a mutt. It has greyhound in him. I call him out. I'm like, Cheddar. Cheddar comes. Hackles come up. Boom, you know what I'm talking about, all the fur. And I'm like, get him! And Cheddar just like, just ears back, just super low to the ground. He takes, for like a half a mile, chases this dog down the road. Like that. I'm like, oh, we just lost our dog. You know, the kids are gonna be so sad. How do I explain this? You know, Daddy was having a bad day, kids. Sorry, your dog's gone. I wish I had a Cheddar for all the conflict in my life. I wish I had an attack dog for all the conflict in my life, that I could just say, get him, and it would just happen. I could just delegate my conflict to my dog. But I can't, can I? And some of us, you're not like me. You don't go into attack mode. You go into escape mode. You're just like, that's fine. You can stay there, dog. That's fine. Pee all over my yard. That's fine. I'm just going to go back in and shut the door. I'm going to ignore the situation. Today, we're going to learn how to engage in conflict in order to make peace. No longer delegating to attack dogs and no longer shutting the door of escape. We're going to learn how to engage conflict in order to make peace today. The context of this passage is conflict. Just to break it down really quick for you, the Jews are pissed. They have a reason to be pissed. They've been oppressed by the Romans for years and years and years and generations. They are upset. There is this sense in the Jewish community, the first century Jewish community, that if Jesus starts talking about the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven, they know what that means. This is what that means to them. It means God's going to set things right, and he's going to get them. He's going to get the oppressors. He's going to show them what's up. He's going to smash them under his thumb. He's going to get those people. And that's what it means. It means a revolution. It means a revolution. And he's going to get those people. This is the backdrop, this angry revolution. The concept of an angry revolution is the backdrop in which Jesus comes to this mountain and preaches this small little sermon. And he says, don't let your anger burn. Anger eventually gives way to words, which escalates to the court and gives birth to death and hell. It's the backdrop of angry revolution that's in the minds and hearts of the Jewish people that he says, don't live with ongoing conflicts so that you're free to worship God. It'll cost you something. So the context of the passage, you leave your gift at the altar. What's a gift? It's like a dove or an animal or something, right? You purchased it. You purchased it, right? You have the animal, and then you have to lay it there, and you have to walk 3 days' journey. That's where he's speaking. He's speaking to people that are 3 days away from the temple. So you think that animal's just going to chill and like wait for him to come back? It's like, no. You leave it, you lose it. It will cost you something. But it's more important than worship services. In the backdrop of Angry Revolution, Jesus says, don't assume your innocence. Humility drives us to settle issues. Pride leads to defensiveness. Humility to reconciliation. But we want revolution our way, don't we? We are like the Jewish people, and we want it our way. We want our coworker to get fired. Be honest, please. Just say, that's true. We've all been there. We're like, yes. And we all wish that our spouse would just shut up sometimes. Especially Ryan. And we fantasize, what if the Terminator was real? And we could send him back in time, and this person would never exist. Life would be so much better if Arnold Schwarzenegger was a real robot. We want our boss to get what he's dishing out. We want people to take their own medicine, and we're not even going to offer them any sugar. We want to ignore and to pretend our marriage is okay, that person is fine, and believe that our opinions are flawless. It's for me, I want to be right. I love conflicts that prove me to be right. I love them. I enjoy them because I want to be right. The conflicts where I could show myself, that's the best. Those are the best conflicts. I want to be right. We want revolution in our own way, don't we? We want the kingdom to come. We say that out loud. I want the kingdom to come. Jesus, I love you. I want the kingdom of God. I want the kingdom of heaven. But I want it to look like me. I want it to look like us. And Jesus, in this passage, he offers us a new way. With the background of angry revolution behind Jesus, he says, be reconciled and make friends. Abandon your position of superiority. Humble yourself and be reconciled. And we know this is right because it's the way the world was first made. And so we have to remember how we were actually made, not what we actually do currently. Because God created the world. He shaped the earth and the cosmos and the environment, and he even shaped us. And he put all these pieces into an ecosystem. And it not only worked to bring life, he created it good and in right relationship. The ecosystem related to itself, and it was good. Plant and animal and fish and air and sea and us and the animals and us and the plants and us and each other and us and God. God and us and the environment, we're in a right relationship. These right systems, because God had established these systems, there was his peace. And it reigned over the earth. The peace of God reigned upon the earth. And then you guys know the story came the day that we said, I think I know how to run this place better than you. And we introduced conflict to those relationships. Violence and exploitation exploded onto the canvas of creation. And the peace of God was lost to us. And there is not peace between us and the environment. And there is not peace between us and God. And there is not peace between us and each other. And yet we have this sliver of a memory. You guys know what I'm talking about. We know war is wrong because we were made for peace. We know something's wrong when relationships break. It hurts our hearts when relationships break because we know we were made for right relationship. And this memory exists. It remains in us. And so from the years preceding from that break, that breach in God's peace, to the maturation of conflict, Jesus of Nazareth strolls into that cosmic chaos. He walks in. The Prince of Peace walks into the mud of our own destruction. And with his own eyes, you have to get this, he's surveying it from a mountain. With his own eyes, he sees the conflict and the rending of that peace. With his own eyes, he sees the impact, the influence, the ramifications of making our own way. He witnesses what happens when we decide how to have relationships. And he sees in this passage that we harbor our anger until it spills out. Sometimes not even on the ones that we're mad at, right? The The boss yells, and the young father belittles, and the wife ignores, and the child suffers, and an endless cycle of hurtful anger passed from one human being to another. It's like a baton of hatred, and we just give it to each other. It just goes around in an endless cycle. He sees in this passage how we hide behind our faith. We pretend that loving God is more important than loving human beings, and we sit and we pray for others rather than approaching them. And he sees how we are more invested in defending ourselves. We don't even attempt to make things right until it's too late. He sees the well-worn path of denial and escape routes, and how concern for me overrides any concern for we. He sees how we've made a world in conflict. And with a small sermon on a nameless mount, he declares to the earth, there is another way. It does not have to be like this. He gave us a choice to become his people. In this passage, he's calling us to be his kingdom people. He's calling us to be the kingdom of God. He's inviting us. He calls us to be his kingdom people, to move away from what is normal, to move away from the status quo of broken relationships. He calls us to be light, to illuminate our darkness. He commands us to be reconciled and to bring peace to conflict. And in the only way that Jesus can, he hits the first domino, starting a chain reaction that divides the world. Those who bring the kingdom and those who continue to bring conflict. And which will you be this morning? He's inviting you. Will you continue denying conflict, avoiding it, making it worse? Or will you deal with it and make peace? The problem with this, of course, it's a very easy, quick passage to read. We're done with it. That's awesome. And our lives are full of conflict still. And we run the well-worn paths of denial, escape, and attack. We're very familiar with shutting the doors of our lives and ignoring it, or setting our attack dogs on the problem. And Jesus is calling us to follow him on a trail that no one walks. He's calling us to be light by dealing with conflict. The question for us this morning is how. And I'm going to do something a little bit different than we normally do at Crucibles. I want us to run a workshop, focusing in on how do we do that. I don't want to convince you have conflict. Can we just say, yes, we have conflict in our lives? Every day of our lives, yes. Okay, I don't have to convince you. Ed, can we just read the teaching of Jesus and say, yes, Jesus is calling us to be a little bit different here? Can we just agree? So the question for us is, okay, how do we do that? He doesn't give us that program in this sermon of how to exactly do that. He gives us some hints. So I want to focus in on how to do that. Is that okay? Can we do that this morning? I'm leaning heavily on Ken Sande's The Peacemaker. It's a wonderful book. This guy is kind of beast mode when it comes to peacemaking. So really enjoy his stuff. Definitely endorse his book. Why don't you read it? But most of us see conflict as something to avoid, something that's wrong, something that is undesirable. Others of us think of conflict as an occasion to force our will on other people. Do you get that difference? There's these two extremes. You either you hate it, you avoid it, it's horrible, it's wrong. And other of us were like, oh, I like it because I get to force my will on other people. We all need to convert to see conflict as an opportunity to demonstrate the love and power of God. Every moment of conflict is an opportunity to display the love and power of God, and we need to convert to that reality. We don't need to avoid conflict or increase the amount of conflict. Conflict already exists. So we just need to work through conflict towards peace. And this honors Jesus. And more importantly, it's actually worship. So if we like worship songs, you should say, man, I really like the opportunity. I don't like conflict, but I like the opportunity to display the love and power of God in the world. That happens through conflict. Not around it, not going away from it. Happens through conflict. So we have to unpack this word conflict, define it. Conflict is when we have a difference in opinion or purpose that frustrates someone else's goals or desires. I think it's pretty self-evident. It's a difference in opinion, purpose that frustrates someone else's goals or desires. What color should the kitchen be, baby? That's ugly. No, that's not ugly. That's my favorite color. No, that color is baby cow poo. That's ugly. How much money should I spend on the car? Should we get a sunroof? Should we not get a sunroof? I don't know. How often should a person shower, for instance? That could create conflict. personal hygiene, I don't believe in wearing deodorant. Oh, please help me, Jesus, I will buy you deodorant. Democrat or Republican, that's definitely very true in our context. Mega church versus micro church, there could be conflict there. What driving route to take? Spouses, you know what I'm talking about. In fact, I took a vacation this summer, and my wife is giving me the stank eye. Amen. We will put this into practice later. We went to the beautiful mountains of North Carolina, and there was like all these waterfalls. Has anybody ever been up there? It's like there's like 1 million waterfalls within like a 10-mile radius, and so, but like they're attached to these crazy mountains, like these roads where if you just like go to sleep for a second, or you're just like paying it, if you're texting on your phone, like you just begin to fly off the mountain for like a mile, and then you die. Or you start swerving into the other lane, and a semi-truck like just plows into you. Like it's kind of a scary road to take. So we're trying to find these waterfalls, these gorgeous kind of these sceneries, and we're looking for it one day. And Jessica has Google Maps out, and we're getting lost. It's the mountains, and we're kind of like losing the signal and can't find it, and it's getting turned around, and the phone's kind of freaking out a little bit, and she starts getting frustrated, and basically, the brakes are smoking because, going down the hills, your brakes start smoking and everything, and I lose it. I'm like, give me the phone, That was my gentle voice. I said it in my calm voice, give me the phone now, something like that. And of course, she's just like really frustrating my goal of getting efficiently and effectively and safely to the destination. She's frustrating that goal. Of course, I'm frustrating the goal of her to actually like serve me and love me and not let us die because I'm looking at the phone instead of looking at the road. This is one of my recent conflicts with Jessica. So what's been one of yours? I want you to look. A lot of you guys have those pieces of paper, and this is kind of a case study. We're going to walk through a conflict that is either recent or current in your life. Something that's kind of been recent in your life or current in your life. We want to like walk through some of these principles. So go ahead, take a minute, write down what's a conflict that's been recent or ongoing in your life. And we'll give you a second to do that. Just going to give you like 15 more seconds. It could be something that you've already resolved, but we want to use it as a case study. All right, that's good. Guys, there's lots of conflicts and lots of reasons for it, but we could place them in 4 broad categories. 4, that's it. 4 broad categories. Primary causes of conflict. I think you guys will recognize some of these. 1 is misunderstandings. This is resulting from poor communication. Has anybody had a text fight? Ever? Should we just, like, as humans, just humanity should just, like, sign an agreement. I will not argue over text. Like, the world would be a better place. Peace on earth would reign if we didn't fight or in text messages or emails. I was horrible at this. Early on in my career, I would email people, and they'd just be like, why are you such a jerk? They would email me. I was like, I'm not being a jerk. I think I'm being very clear in my email and stuff like that. I had to learn over time. I'm clearly miscommunicating my intent. I think I'm being helpful, and they're like, you're being something else, and doesn't start with an H. And so I started putting like smiley faces everywhere in my texts and emails. I'm like, just so you know, I'm smiling right now. I'm totally happy with you, like smiley face. So if you don't get a smiley face from me and I'm being a jerk, I really am being just a jerk at that point. These are miscommunications. The second broad category is differences in values, goals, callings, priorities. We have differences. They're not necessarily wrong. They're just different. The classic for this is Democrat or Republican. It's not like Democrats love America and Republicans hate America. It's not that Republicans love America and Democrats hate America. They just have different ways, different value sets to express. Both of them would say, I love America, I love this country. And they have different ways of living that out, and it creates conflict, does it not? And we see it every election season. There's this conflict happening between these two parties. Or in your microchurch, this could happen. Someone could feel a different calling. They've been coming to your microchurch for a while, and they just feel like, man, I feel called to something else. I feel called to these people group over here, to go over here. But you feel rejected by that. You're like, man, but I'm called over here, and now you're called over here. And these two callings create a conflict, room for a conflict, right? Where you go, man, I feel a little rejected by that. I feel hurt by that. I know recently, I guess it was about last year, I had an outreach with my home church. It was a pumpkin carving thing, and is Kathy here? Can I tell the story? I just totally forgot. I didn't ask if I could tell the story. That's cool? Okay, good. Woo! I'm a professional, people. So Kathy and I are like really, there's this new person there sitting on my couch, and we just got done carving pumpkins, and man, I'm an evangelist, so I want to talk about Jesus. I really do enjoy talking about Jesus, and I want to always help people take their next step of faith, whatever that is. So I'm not trying to sell them a product. I'm not trying to convert them or anything weird like that. I just wanted them to take a next step. So I'm like asking her questions. What's your spiritual experience and what was that like? And can you unpack that for me? Because I'm genuinely curious. I want to know. And I also want her to make her next step, take a next step closer to Jesus, whatever that means for her, right? Kathy is a shepherd. She doesn't want this girl to feel uncomfortable in the least, to the point where in the middle of our conversation, she's like, you don't have to answer his questions. She's like, yeah, that's kind of awkward what he just said, so you don't have to go there. In fact, for me, I wouldn't even pay attention to him. No, she wasn't like that. But there was this conflict of values. Like, I valued her taking her next step and having this conversation. She valued just this person just feeling totally loved and enveloped and hugged and welcomed. And there was I was like, what's happening? We're undermining each other in the middle of this conversation. I'm like asking the question, and she's like, why aren't you shepherding her? And I'm like, why aren't you asking these questions? So really interesting. Not bad though. Both of us love this person. Both of us have different ways, different values of loving this person. And we just have to work through that and work through that conflict. If we didn't address it, that would be the problem, right? But we're able to work through that conflict. Differences might not mean bad or wrong or evil, but it still causes conflict. The third broad brushstroke here is competition over limited resources such as time or money. I think that's pretty obvious. Early in my marriage, there was a competition between my wife and the Xbox for my time. And not really proud of that moment in our history, but, sometimes she won, and most of the time she didn't. And it caused some conflict in our relationship. Number 4, aggravated by sinful attitudes or habits. So it's easy to lump these other 3 into this one. Miscommunication or differences in values. We just immediately say, yeah, sinful, like bad, wrong. And we immediately equate it to that. Or you get the text and you're kind of like, mother humping, no, heck no, girl. And you blow them up. You know what I'm talking about? It's just your sinful reaction kind of aggravated the situation. They didn't really mean that, and come to find out the autocorrect will put the wrong word, and you're so offended by it, and you just blow them up, but it was kind of like you made it worse. It was miscommunication, but you didn't add sinful attitudes or habits to that. It made it worse. So these are the 4 broad categories or causes for conflict. When this conflict happens, we engage in what Ken Sande calls the slippery slope. We're going to show a diagram really quick. This slippery slope. And in this slippery slope, there's 3 general responses to conflict. There's the escape, the attack, and the peacemaking responses. So I just want to touch on a few of these. There's the escape. This is the shutting of the door. This is the, I'm getting out of here. I don't want to deal with the stupid chihuahua on my front lawn, you know? I'm getting out of here. And that comes in a couple different parts. There's denial. This is where you bury it. This is the elephant in the room where you pretend it doesn't exist. There is a real conflict, but you pretend like it's not there. This is like your gay uncle that no one wants to talk to or engage. You just ignore it. There is a conflict of values and how to really love him and care for him, but instead you just ignore it. You just pretend like it doesn't exist. The second thing is flight. Flight, this is you run away from it. Removal of relationship. This is I unfriend you from Facebook. Take that. Or often it's slowly over time. As denial grows, we find ourselves later in flight. We find ourselves not in relationship. And we've slowly over time run away from them, run away from the problem, actually. And it breaks the relationship. And of course, the last thing is suicide, and that is the extreme escape. The other side, the other extreme is attack response. This is basically sending your little dog, your attack dog, to kill the little dog. This is assault. This is overwhelming your opponent verbally, emotionally, or physically. The whole purpose is you just want to impose your will on the situation. You're not leaving until you agree with me. And this is very much about control or manipulation. So assault is very much about control or manipulation, power dynamics. And you're trying to impose your will through argumentation or emotional stuff or physical stuff. There's also litigation. This is calling for outside reinforcements. This is stepping it up. There's no concern for the other person. This is just trying to win. I'm going to do whatever it takes to win this thing. And it's only about winning or controlling. And of course, the last, most extreme attack response is murder. And obviously, we're not into that. So we tend to default on one extreme or the other, one side or the other. We default to that. We're driven there by internal wounds outside of the current conflict. So it doesn't matter what the current conflict is. We tend to default one side or the other. We want to run away or we want to attack. We always attack because maybe, I don't know, for you, it might be deep wounds from your parents' divorce. I don't know why you attack. Or you're always escaping because you believe that you're unlovable. You feel like you're unlovable, so you always just run away from stuff when there's a problem. We need to take this stuff to Jesus, guys. I say, God, I need you. I need to get before you and ask why. God, why do I default to either attack or escape? Why do I run to these extreme places and not to peace? Why am I not running to peace first? And let these things be like exceptions or accidents, but a lot of us default primarily to one of these two extremes. That's an internal work that has to happen in your heart. The third category, third response, is peacemaking. And we'll talk about the edges of peacemaking here in a second. But this is where we're kind of going. There's lots of room. There's lots of space in peacemaking, so it doesn't have to look one particular way. So there's lots of opportunity for it, but this is where we're headed. So on the edges, you can see here, there's overlook on this edge, which is very similar to denial. But this is the love and grace posture. So instead of just burying it deep within and just never going to talk about it ever again, you love and you have grace for this person. It's not a false peace where you just bury it. It's like, no, I really, that kind of hurt my feelings a little bit, but I love this brother so much. I have grace for this person so much. I don't keep a record of wrong. It really is okay between us. But it's a love and grace posture. Brian talks about this all the time. He talks about he's a prickly person, right? So you think working with him every once in a while, he might say something that might you're like, oh, that kind of smarted a little bit, right? Now, this happens all the time, man. Prickly dudes, you're just like, man, I love this brother. I have no record of wrong. But if I do, if it hinders me, if it sticks with me, then it becomes denial. Does that make sense? So overlook is actually overlooking it, loving them beyond that moment, that momentary slip up. And it happens in a very real way. There's, of course, these other things, reconciliation, negotiation. Read the book if you want to know all that stuff. But just so you know, negotiation and mediation, you could bring other people. Other people might actually help the situation. So it's totally fine to say, hey, brother, sister, can we just invite somebody else into the conversation? And maybe they might add wisdom to the thing. That's going for peace. Okay, and of course, the other edge here is accountability. Now, that could be very similar to assault, but again, this is the love and grace posture. You're holding them accountable, not to sanitize assault, but because you love them. You're holding them accountable to what they said because you love them, not because you're trying to force your will on them, not just because you're trying to manipulate them. It's because you really love them. Makes sense, right? Pretty easy. Go ahead, go back to your sheets. I want you to unpack the causes and the responses that you had in your conflict. So your case study, where did the conflict come from? Miscommunication, differences, competition, sinful attitudes and actions. On both sides, what was the cause for you? What was the cause for them? And of course, the response. Where on the slippery slope did you go, when the conflict arose? Where did they go when the conflict arose? Okay? So I'll just give you a few minutes to kind of unpack your case study, your personal case study. How do we deal with conflict? We deal with it by identifying the causes and the responses within it. That's one dealing with conflict. For my vacation conflict with Jessica, I wanted to efficiently arrive at a destination without dying, and Jessica wanted to please me and do a good job helping me navigate also without dying. And of course, I exacerbated the situation with sinful attitudes and my a-holeness. She was stubborn and didn't give me the phone. Give me the phone. No. And the response was I assaulted her verbally, aggressively and verbally, and she assaulted me with her emotions. I was like, why are you crying? She's like, I don't know. Oh my gosh, what's happening? We're going to careen off this mountain. We're called to be the people of Jesus, the people of God. We're called to be people who bring peace, and we have to enter conflict in His way. It is normal for us in our world to harbor hatred in our hearts, allowing it to fester. It's normal for us to escape and believe that everything is okay. It's normal for us to be defensive and ready to attack. And all of these ways have me at the center. And because all of these ways have me at the center, it's normal to have conflict, and for that conflict to break our relationships. Jesus is calling us into a different way, to neither ignore nor revel in the conflict, but deal with it in a God-centered way, so that His peace would reign in our lives. So how do we engage conflict in a Jesus-centered way? We've identified the causes, responses, then how do we walk forward into the conflict? So there's 4 questions, 4 aspects to a God-centered approach that we want to unpack. And if we ask these questions, these corresponding questions, I think we'll be on the right path. So number 1, we have to glorify God. We have to ask the question, how can I please and honor Jesus in this conflict? It has to be an authentic question. Not like, how can Jesus help me get this person? No bueno. Okay? God, what do you want in this situation? How can we find you in this situation? Where are you? How are you working in this situation? That removes me from the center. It actually removes them from the center, and it puts Jesus in the center of the conflict. It's an opportunity now to display His love and power if we begin by asking, God, what are you doing? How can we find you? How can we bring you glory? And we begin to fade in the background. We fix our eyes on him, and that to be able to pray, Jesus, come into the conversation. I think would revolutionize much of our attitudes. I mean, could I really yell at my wife about the phone if I'm asking Jesus, God, come into the conversation? It's going to be a little bit more difficult to have that kind of conflict. When you invited Jesus into the room, the fog begins to lift. Freedom to apologize is felt. Clarity becomes more evident. How would your conflicts change if you prayed, Jesus, come into this conflict? And by the end, we could say, we worshiped you, Jesus. I mean, wouldn't that be awesome to, on the other side of your conflict, say, man, we worshiped God in that thing. Like, God was glorified. It was messy. It was emotional, it was troubling, it got heated and back and forth, but God, we invited you, and by the end of it, we could say with our hearts, we worshiped you in this. Number 2, we get the log out of our own eye. This is where Jesus references, don't talk about the dust in somebody else's eye. Get the giant stick out of your own eye. This is get yourself together, okay? How can I take responsibility for my part, my contribution to this conflict? So it's not about them. It's about Jesus. You're not trying to say, Jesus, reveal to me their mistakes. No, Jesus, I want to honor you. Reveal to me my flaws, my shortcomings, my impatience, my ungratitude, show me me. I feel like when we do that, guys, when we put Jesus at the center, and we start asking that question, grace frees us to apologize. His grace. When we come with the posture, I'm jacked up. I'm actually a messed up person in this situation. I definitely got it wrong. Somehow, some way, maybe I don't see it, but I know it's messed up somehow. I know that the grace of God, I need Jesus, I need the cross. And if you come with that posture, you will be free to apologize. You'll be like, yeah, I know I'm messed up. It's not a problem. I can freely say, man, I am sorry for this. I apologize for this. Oh my gosh, I know I didn't mean that. Oh my gosh, please don't say that to people. Just because you didn't mean it doesn't mean that it didn't hurt. The fact that it hurt should grieve our souls, right? So it's like, man, I am so sorry. I didn't mean it, but man, who cares? It hurts you. And that makes me sad. And I apologize for that. I wish I did it differently so that it didn't wound you. We are free when we go to the cross, when we ask God, show us our own flaws, we're free to apologize. If we want to make peace by first saying sorry, if we want to make peace, we need to first say we're sorry. And there's probably a dozen folks in your lives that you could say you're sorry to, you could apologize to. They need to hear you say that I'm sorry and not expect anything in return. It's not like I said I'm sorry and what was that? The Hulk Hogan. I need to hear what, and your words are, the expectation of something in return negates the apology. It doesn't mean that they don't have to apologize. They probably should. We'll get to that in a second. But this step is just you giving it without expectation, without condition. Just recently, there was a nonprofit hostile takeover in Tampa. Some pastors decided this nonprofit needed to be taken over, and they wanted to attack this leader, and they got so bad that they actually began to take it to court, where one of the judges was a Christian and looked at these pastors and this CEO of this nonprofit and said, "You guys are Christians! Get out of my court! Deal with it!" Kicked them out of the court. Because they're Christians. They're like, "You guys, no. And then he said, you need to read The Peacemaker, this book that I'm referencing throughout this talk. He says, read this book. Deal with it. Make peace with each other. They started walking through these steps. I think it was just this past week, the pastor's on the phone with one of their lawyers or the mediator or something like that they have between them in tears for the ways they've hurt this other leader, this CEO of this nonprofit. In tears, just grieving over over their sin, over their impatience, over their lack of love and grace. Awesome. They were weeping over their own sin. Number 3, we need to gently restore. Gently being a key word, restore also being a key word. How can I lovingly serve others by helping them take responsibility for their contribution in this conflict? This is where you share honestly your concern or your issues or your wounds. So you do get a place where you say, man, this really did wound me. This really did hurt. You have to be honest with them. You can't just say, and I'm not going to tell you how it actually hurt me, and I'm just going to bury that wound. No, you should. That's a part. It's not good for them. It's not good for them that you hold that back. You must gently restore them. Part of that restoration is saying, man, this hurt. I'm wounded by this. I'm upset by this. They may not even receive. So get this. They may not receive it. They may not agree or care. It may be a process spanning years of reconciliation. But the difference is you will not be angry. You will become sad. You'll be sad. Because you're coming to them with love and grace. And because it's bad for them. It's bad for them to not recognize their contribution. And you'll be sad about it. But the peace will actually remain in your hearts. This has happened in my life several times. Students at USF have hated me several times in my life when I worked for InterVarsity. But there was only one student in particular that there was this whole group of students. They really didn't like me anymore. And I had to call them and one by one kind of say, hey, can we sit down? Can we reconcile? Can I apologize for all this stuff, all the ways I've wronged you? And kind of work on that relationship, pursue reconciliation. But there was one student who wouldn't have it. Didn't ever meet with me. Ever meet with me. Ever. And I was not angry with her. I was just sad. I was sad because we couldn't have this anymore. And yet, I also still had peace in my heart. Because I pursued her in the way that I think Jesus wanted me to pursue her. It wasn't about me, it was about him. It wasn't about me being perfect, it's about me really trying to apologize. And she did not receive it, and she didn't care. I still had peace in my heart, and yet I'm sad for her. And if I were to see her again, I think I could bless her. Like, in that sense, there is healing. Like, if I saw her again, I would be able to hug her, bless her, pray over her. Okay, does that make sense? God has done the work in my heart, and I could give blessing to her. Number 4, this is the last one. Go and be reconciled. Commit to each other beyond the issue. How can I demonstrate the forgiveness of God and encourage a reasonable solution to this conflict? This is what we're asking. This is a we solution. Not just to get what you want, but the passage is go and run. Don't allow ongoing conflict to remain. Do everything in your power. Don't sing songs of worship if things are not right. We must keep short lists, short accounts with each other. Division, hatred, bitterness, these things are mission killers. If we start fighting with each other, it will kill our mission in life. Our purposes of God will not be realized if we are fighting with each other in ongoing conflict. We must go to them. We must seek out reconciliation. We must be committed to them beyond the current conflict. Don't avoid, don't assault, deal with the conflict. It will get messy, but you will also make peace. This is what Paul says, as a prisoner for the Lord, then I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling that you have received. How do you do that? Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. Guys, the Greek word for make every effort here is what the trainers for gladiators would use. When he sent men into the arena to fight, he essentially means make every effort to stay alive today. Go and make every effort to live with the bond of peace. Fight for a solution. Fight for the relationship. Fight for love, for partnership, for peace. If it's possible to forgive and to have a relationship, fight for it. Don't forgive from afar and then run away. Run towards. Don't love at a distance but not want anything to do with that person. I know you might not be able to be BFFs. Or maybe there's codependency issue, or maybe this person has passed on. But I believe in a creative God whose cross was strong enough to bridge the divide between us and him. And so therefore, I believe he can lead you to genuine, authentic, and powerful reconciliation solutions in light of these difficulties if you fight for it. Do everything in your power. So just really quick, the last little bit here of your case study. I want you to begin the process of peacemaking by writing an apology letter. I know there's not a lot of space, and what I mean by that is you probably can only fit about 3 sentences, but I think those are the hardest ones. If you get the first 3 out in your apology, you're going to be all right. You get the first 3 out, you'll find your way with the rest. So I just want to give you 1 minute to begin your process of reconciliation in this conflict and begin an apology letter. The musicians can go ahead and come on up. And this is what Jesus says right before this passage. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. So let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Previous to this passage, Jesus calls us to be the light of the world, but he clarifies that we should not be lit with anger. And there are things to be angry over in this world, but anger does not make us light. It doesn't make us different. What lights up the world and brings the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven is being different, relationally different, because reconciliation is powerful. To be light, we must tap the power of reconciliation. We must cross those racial divides. We must cross across those cubicle barriers. We must love and forgive and go and make every effort to forgive and make peace. When we reconcile, it is powerful. It is light. 20 years ago in Rwanda, nearly 1 million people were killed in the genocide that took place there. Over 250,000 women were raped. Hutu women hacked to death with hammers and machetes their neighbors. And it remains one of the darkest moments in human history. In the wake of the genocide, a reconciliation movement was started. It was established and based on biblical principles, led by state Christians, to establish the peace of Christ and to work out the damage that had been done, to work out reconciliation, forgiveness, and relationship. Just recently, Peter Hugo captured a series of unlikely and almost unthinkable stories in which he shows these photographs and he gets them to tell their story. And in each one of these, I want to read these stories. I want them to wash over you the power of reconciliation. In each one of these stories, the perpetrator is a Hutu who was granted pardon by the Tutsi survivor. So story number 1, I burned her house. I attacked her in order to kill her and her children, but God protected them and they escaped. When I was released from jail, I saw her. Every time I saw her, I would run and hide. And then they started to provide us with trainings And I decided to ask for forgiveness, to have good relationships with the person to whom I did evil deeds. And we thank God. And she replies, I used to hate him. When he came to my house and knelt down and asked me for forgiveness, I was moved by his sincerity. Now, if I cry for help, he comes to rescue me. When I face any issue, I call him. And story number 2. Because of the genocide perpetrated in 1994, I participated in the killing of the son of this woman. We are now members of the same group of unity and reconciliation. We share everything. If she needs some water to drink, I fetch it for her. If there is no suspicion between us, whether under sunlight or during the night. I used to have nightmares recalling the sad events I've been through, but now I can sleep peacefully. And when we are together, we are like brother and sister, with no suspicion between us. And she replies, he killed my child. And then he came to ask me for pardon. And I immediately granted it to him. Because he did not do it by himself, he was haunted by the devil. I was pleased by the way he testified to the crime instead of keeping it in hiding. Because it hurts if someone keeps their crime in hiding. Before, when I had not yet granted him pardon, he would not come close to me. I treated him like an enemy. But now, I would rather treat him like my own child. Third story. The day I thought of asking pardon, I felt unburdened and relieved. I had lost my humanity because of the crime I had committed. But now I am like any other human being. And she replies, after I was chased from my village and Dominique and the others looted it, I became homeless and insane. And later when he asked for my pardon, I said, I have nothing to feed my children. Are you going to help me raise my children? What about my home? Will you build me a home? And that next week, Dominique came with other former prisoners who perpetrated the genocide. There were more than 50 of them, and they built my family a home. And ever since then, I started to feel better. I was like a dry stick, and now I feel peaceful in my heart. And I share that peace with my neighbors. Guys, reconciliation is powerful. It is an opportunity. Conflict is an opportunity to display the majesty, the power of God. It is light and darkness. And in a world full of affairs and betrayals, lies and gossip, divorce, hatred, racism, sexism, power plays, and exploitation, in this world, when marriages are restored, friendships are established, cross-cultural relationships are genuine, love is offered, radical apologies are muttered, when the homeless mingle with the wealthy and Republicans hug it out with Democrats. When this happens, we become a city on a hill, don't we? We light up the world and the world screams, how is this possible? How does this happen? How do you go from genocide to he is like my child that he murdered? How do we get there, people? How do we get from 400 years of slavery to reconciliation and genuine friendship in multicultural communities? How do we get there? The world will scream, how does this happen? And we will point back to this mountain in this sermon that Jesus spoke, and we say, follow the one who walked into our chaos, right? We endure the one who endured the anger of the Jews, the wrathful courts of the Romans, and who was murdered on the cross. The one who did not give in to anger. He lived the life we were called to live. He took the penalty we rightfully deserve. Follow the one who empowers us to live, the one who through the power of the cross shapes us into different people. People that can love and forgive and apologize. And when we follow Jesus into reconciliation and friendship, we proclaim the gospel as shining cities and infernos of light, because our words are, I'm sorry, please forgive me, be reconciled to me. Today, he's calling you and me to be his kingdom people, to reintroduce the peace of God to a conflicted world, to usher in reconciliation, not only between God and man, but between each other. Today, he's calling you to be light and salt and peacemakers so that others might taste the goodness of the garden and live into the memory of what they were created for. This dream that we have of great relationships. And it begins with us first being reconciled back to God. If we're to follow this God into reconciliation, it begins with the work of Jesus on the cross. And it begins at this table. And so I pass on to you what I received at first. The Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, he took bread. When he had given thanks, he broke it. He said, "This is my body, given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, said, "This is the new covenant of my blood. Whenever you drink it, remember me." Whenever you eat this bread and you drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he returns. Guys, there was no hope in reconciliation between us and God. And because he did this work, there is now hope for any situation. There is now light in any place of darkness because he first came to us and reconciled us to himself. Guys, the body and blood of Jesus given for you.